It's a rare glimpse inside of some of the most precious ecosystems on the planet. Starting on September 8th, National Geographic TV will begin airing their series National Parks USA, and one of the episodes features the Everglades right here in Florida. We got the opportunity to sit down with the cinematographer for that episode for a wide-ranging conversation about the series, including what's his trick to getting the perfect shot of animals interacting in their natural habitat.
We've had to wait for, long periods of time. These shows were produced pretty fast. So one trick to avoiding having to sit out there for weeks on end is really knowing the right people, knowing the scientists, guides, people on the ground, people that live and breathe the Everglades, getting their advice, getting their, perspective on where to be. And then it's just knowing these animals, knowing their behavior, doing our research, spending a lot of time out there. Sometimes we'll sit there for days on end. It might not be a surprise that the gopher tortoise was one of the ones that wouldn't perform for us. So we are out there just waiting on it. And, the story for that one ended up being about all the other residents that are living alongside the gopher tortoise. So you get these animals that you're going for, and then sometimes you get these other stories that you didn't expect that appear in front of you. And so we'll pivot and do that story. There are other animals like the Florida panther, which somebody might live in Florida for their entire life and never see. So we rely on camera trap technology for that. It's too shy to be out there, too shy to be, around people. So we will, sit out with cameras that can record without us there, and they sit for weeks and weeks and capture that one moment.
What are some of the pieces of equipment that you use specifically to get either the gopher tortoise or, the Florida panther and some of the underwater and night vision shots as well?
Yeah, I mean, so we have cameras that, are dedicated to recreating kind of our perspective, our feeling of being there, high resolution cameras like the Red Monstro that put you in that situation of just feeling like you're there. And then we have cameras that give us a new perspective. One of, ultra high speed cameras like the Phantom Veo that can catch, dolphins catching mullet in midair. And we have underwater systems that can be underneath the mangroves and give us that whole new perspective. We have aerial systems, gimbal mounted cameras on helicopters or drones outside the parks can give us a bird's eye perspective of everything. One aspect of the show that we try to do is to also make sure we are bringing the audioscape of these places. So recreating this feeling, this sound, this sonic landscape of being, underneath a spoonbill colony.
The Everglades seem to be massive, but truly, how diverse is that ecosystem in that part of the state of Florida?
It's incredibly diverse. The Everglades was special because it's the 20th national park, but there are 19 before it that were created for geological wonders, from Yellowstone to Carlsbad Caverns. The Everglades kind of represents this pivot point in thinking about national parks and how they should be protected or how they should be made to protect the wildlife, plants, the ecosystem within. And the Everglades is really the one that represents that shift in thinking. And so, the people that like Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and the people before her that helped establish this park, they recognized that this was a one-of-a-kind landscape, that there are plants and animals there that exist nowhere else. It's so biodiverse that it is a natural wonder of its own.
Recently, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection announced plans for hotels and other developments inside of state parks. They have since withdrawn those plans, but how important is it for the future of state parks and also national parks to just leave nature alone and let it thrive?
It's critical, and it's especially important with places like the Everglades, which have a greater ecosystem. So there's the Everglades with a capital E, and then there's the lowercase Everglades, which is the entire watershed from north of Lake Okeechobee all the way down to the Everglades. And that system's just absolutely connected. And, things like hotels, things like just any sort of development also require roads and these systems that disrupt the entire environment. They act like dams in the Everglades. They stop wildlife from being able to use corridors. It's critical, and it's critical to recognize that these are finite areas that are already on kind of the brink of disappearing. And, the national parks and state parks and other public lands were just absolutely critical in keeping that from being lost forever.
A woman named Betty Osceola is featured quite extensively throughout the Everglades episode. How important is her work and the work of people like her to the future of the Everglades?
Betty is a force of nature. She's amazing. And her kind of work is incredibly important. The Miccosukee tribe, the Seminole tribe, and their ancestors have been there forever. They were there before the Everglades were the Everglades, before it was a park, obviously, and before it was an ecosystem. It was much drier. The state of Florida was much wider when they were living there and breathing this land and understanding it. And so respecting that knowledge that she brings is one that can be parallel to, our ideas of Western science, and just making sure we understand that her perspective is critical. She's a voice for the people who have always been there. She's a voice for the wildlife, and she's just great.
Did you work on any other episodes? And what can people who tune in to see National Parks USA on National Geographic expect when they're flipping through and watching these shows?
Yeah, I worked on all 5 of the episodes, and that's Yellowstone, Everglades, Zion, Katmai, and Olympic. When you tune in, you can expect these to be visual love letters to the national parks, to the wildlife and cultures within them. So you can expect great wildlife stories, you can expect great human stories, you can expect just gorgeous scenery and great narration from our narrator, Michael Spears.
The National Geographic series National Parks USA premieres on National Geographic TV beginning on September 8th and will air over 3 consecutive weeks. Episodes begin streaming on September 9th on Disney Plus and Hulu. Jeff Reed, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Rich.